And here we go. Just making sure you got out of the shot. You didn't want any surprise guests. We have enough guests behind us here.
Oh, yeah.
Charles.
Hi.
Good to see you, man.
Great to see you.
I'm excited to be here in San Francisco, RSAC Conference 2025. We're having a good chat about Coalfire, unless we can sneak in some music. I think I have a way to do that. But yeah, because we both love to play. It's amazing how many people play instruments in this.
You know, there's a huge crossover between music and math.
Right, exactly.
And you know, you look at the number of people that have musical backgrounds in not only engineering, science, and math and whatnot, but specifically in cybersecurity. I think of people with music degrees, and there's also, especially in our area of cybersecurity and offensive security and defensive security, if you think of blue and red team, it's a lot less paint by numbers and more true art form.
How can I push?
Yeah.
What does the pull come back sound like or feel like or whatever? Yeah, there's the math. I used to write code, which is a language, right? And I feel creating music is also language. Hacking and then looking for a path is also a language. But that's amazing, the crossover. And I'll have another chance to talk about music. So we're gonna, first off, your role at Coalfire, and then we're gonna take a few steps back into time and talk about some other stuff. But what are you up to at Coalfire now?
So I run the cybersecurity services division of Coalfire. And what you can think about it is, if you think about Coalfire's legacy in assessment and compliance, they've also have
talking like HIPAA and SOC 2
and PCI and you know, all the compliance efforts that are very much alongside the cybersecurity efforts. They also have, you know, a rich history in offensive security, and you know, you can think about the much publicized incident they had in Colorado where they had a little run-in with a tester who was detained, and you know, all these things. Yes. You know, they've been doing that for a while. I was really brought in about a year ago to really broaden that and take it to the sort of the full line of elite cybersecurity services and build up that practice. So you can think about not only the red side of the house with red teaming, penetration testing, you know, hardware testing, all the way down to, you know, assessment of BIOS work.
Or no?
What's that?
You go down to the BIOS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You as well, looking at things like exposure management, all that sort of offensive side of the house, right?
Yep. We
wanted to make a defensive side of the house as well. We've done that. You know, we have Grifter and
love Grifter.
He longtime friend.
You can't not love Grifter.
You know, he worked for me at the last shop too, and you know, we've been great friends, and it just works well. But you know, we've got, you know, Bart and all these other guys that are really instrumental in that side of the industry, real thought leaders, and bringing those two sides together along with a managed component over the top, where we can, you know, look at things like exposure management and whatnot and bring it together and really look at the entirety of a cybersecurity need for an organization. You know, we're not trying to get in the commoditized services. We're trying to do the things that actually make a difference.
Well, as you're describing that, I was picturing a Stanley Cup hockey team with multiple lines that are just filled with amazing talent.
It is a team sport. Cybersecurity is absolutely a team sport. And, you know, it's kind of funny because I think all too often it's really easy. And some of this is sort of in some ways, almost antisocial nature of many of us in cybersecurity. But there's this lone gun person feel to it. Like, hey, I'm out there and I'm John Wayne, or I'm you know, pick your favorite old Western character that rides into town on a horse and rides out at the end of the movie.
Right.
It's not that simple. It's really coming together as a team and doing all of that, and working in concert. You know, it's the whole band, not just the guitar solo. Exactly. Hey, there we go. Yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it?
You got it again. So let's talk about this. You didn't say Lone Ranger, but I'm picturing the single person trying to be the hero. It's not reality, but the uniqueness is a reality.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where I want to take things back to, like DEF CON 1 and 2 in the early days, where it's a bunch of unique people with their own perspectives, their own agendas, their own desires, their own skill sets, but they come together at DEF CON, right? So take us back in time and let's look at kind of the early days of hackers, I guess.
Well, you think back to those days, and we got together. I think about like even HoHoCon, which no one even knows what that is now, but that was probably bigger than DEF CON back in the day. And we would get together, and there wasn't like multiple tracks. It wasn't like
right.
It wasn't like the huge event that it is now. It was, hey, here are 8 talks we're going to get together and watch today, and after that we'll go out for beers.
Right.
Yeah, and it was like-minded friends. It was a chance to be creative, and I think a lot of that was there wasn't really an industry. I mean,
Right.
At that point in time, I thought I was going to grow up and be a lawyer because I had 2 parents that were lawyers, and that's just what happened when you grew up, And
follow the path, exactly.
I still remember very early on in sort of in my college experience and everything, realizing, hey, there might be a career here, and people were starting to get jobs in like penetration testing and sort of picking. In those days, I think everyone was getting a job in penetration testing. Like the idea of a blue team wasn't there yet, and
there were no Sims.
No. It was like
Hey, that AV, maybe a firewall.
I mean, we all self-identified as hackers, so that was like the natural progression. And I got that first job, and I thought it was so cool because now I'm getting paid to do the stuff that I love, right? Like I probably would have done it for free,
right? Don't tell them that.
Yeah. But and to this day, I tell my team, you're paid to write reports. Hacking you do for free. That's the fun part. But
is that feeling still there?
Yeah, I still get excited.
For you,
yeah.
But how about your team?
Yeah,
Is that same sense of?
If you don't love what you do, it's really hard to give the level of dedication that you need in cybersecurity because it really is a stacked deck, So you need that love of the game. And I tell people when they fall out of that love, it's time to look for a different area of cybersecurity to focus on. So, you see a lot of ex-penetration testers that maybe move to threat hunting or something like that. It doesn't mean you need to give up and go find a new passion in life. Sometimes you can just, kind of move a little bit.
Right.
And, I think about my own start. It was always about finding the next challenge to keep yourself engaged because you owe it to your clients.
Were you pen testing as a service, or were you internally hired to test inside stuff or from the outside?
So I ended up very early on doing pen testing as a service, and it was probably the coolest thing ever because for me at least, it was more exciting because that meant that every couple of weeks it was a totally different challenge and different. And it kept me, I think, engaged longer than a lot of the people that I started out with and gave me a little bit more focus. And that's something that notoriously in the cybersecurity community, focus is not easy to come by, It set me up for success in a weird way.
Interesting. So I want to get into kind of the transformation of Coalfire, but I want to stick with your transformation and maybe the evolution of the role of cybersecurity or the people in cybersecurity. Things have changed. That's why I asked the question, do you think that feeling inside has remained? It sounds like it has. But the world has changed dramatically around us. With cloud, and I'm just picking on mobile and cloud, and now AI. So how do those changes affect the people looking at this world that we live in now?
Well, I mean, you think about threat actors in the 90s, and people say, well, you're who are you worried about? In the early 90s, it was a disgruntled 13-year-old in their parents' basement, I mean, that was a legitimate concern. I guess it still is, but the bigger concern is, I mean, it's a much more organized threat actor. It's organized crime, nation state, all these things. And I think about the evolution of the defenses of whether those be offensive or defensive security, all these things as they start moving forward. they were driven by that threat actor.
Right.
So, one of the things I strive for with my teams, and I really impress upon them the importance of this, is we need to be threat focused. We need to be threat centric. And if you look at evolution of the industry, you're really following that threat actor path. But in a way, you're following it from the front.
Is it easy to do? Following that path?
Well, if you follow from the front, it is.
Okay.
If you get behind,
Okay.
that's the problem. And so it's the anticipation of what's next. It's staying with research. And so part of that is selling your organization on, hey, it's not enough to catch up. We need to be at the forefront. We need to think about what's next. We need to really be engaged in research. And that's, by the way, another wonderful path to stay engaged as a practitioner.
Yeah.
Is saying,
Keep
hey,
it fresh.
get engaged in research.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So I'm going to take a wild guess that's probably linked to some of the evolution we've seen in Coalfire. Obviously, bringing you on a year ago to kind of build out the full thing. But how has Coalfire services transformed over the past years as well?
We've really tried to up-level and become more programmatic in the way we think about things.
Meaning, how's that? Relate that to CISO listening. What does that mean for them?
So, buying a test or engaging in a test is, that gets you a great outcome, but it's a one-to-one relationship, right? If you start looking at it as a testing program or a threat hunting program or a mission, that's when you're successful. Threat actors today are so much more complicated than they were, even 5 years ago.
Okay.
And they've really gotten to the point where they have efficiencies of scale, division of labor, all these things, such that if you're just doing a one-to-one relationship, you're already behind. I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. So when you look at how to, from a top down, we take all of these what were disparate services as recently in the not too distant past, at least, and make them work together so that you start to get a multiplicative impact from them. So that your threat hunting and your red teaming, purple teaming, whatever, and your testing, they all come together to affect an overarching security program, right?
Right.
And that also means that, we talked about the antisocial nature of security.
Right.
You can't be antisocial and win because,
Well, you got a lot of teams here.
and we saw it, you think about the way the threat actors, access brokers as an example,
Right.
where you went from someone who start to finish, it was the same criminal organization. Now you see criminal organizations maybe selling access to another criminal organization. You see specialization. You see division labors, people working together. And if we on the other side of the fence are not working together, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
So clearly, you said got to be ahead of the game. So you and the Coalfire team are working hard on that to stay ahead of the threat actor, but also staying ahead of the changes in the business, I presume, as well. How do you see teams inside the organization, security leaders in particular, viewing the current state of their program, current state of the threat, current state of the risk their business faces? Are there signs that they're seeing that say, we can't do this ourselves, we need teams that have this insight and the view to things that we can't see and we're not staffed to see?
I think almost universally you see that. But the difference is you see some that maybe feel a little bit overwhelmed and others that have sort of that trusted outlook.
Right.
And there are a lot of ways that they tackle it. Some will try and piece together their own solution. Some are looking for a turnkey. I want to all from one house. What's important, though, if you're in that role, is whether you are making it programmatic or your vendor is making that programmatic. It's got to be programmatic. And, I think you are less and less seeing security owners who are saying, I'm going to just take 11 billion vendors and put it together. They're looking for a level of simplification.
Right.
And that's important because,
Even the security tooling, it can expose. Yeah, you see somebody recognize.
Yeah, the eye contact.
It's inevitable.
If you think about, like, if you bought a car in parts, that would be great for real automotive enthusiasts, I guess. But for your average driver, it would be way too complicated, and it would probably result in an unsafe vehicle.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's about picking the right way to make it programmatic, picking the right cohesive manner to put that car together, and making it work. And it's also about, what does good look like? How do I score that things are doing well? How do I even know? Because really, if you're a cybersecurity program,
great.
How many did I have?
Right. How many did you not find?
Yeah, I found 50% of my vulns. No one knows that.
Right.
What does good look like? Because really what you're kind of pushing towards in security is the absence of something bad.
Right.
You know, the CISO's best day is when they go to sleep at a reasonable hour. How do you know that things are going well versus things are going poorly? And, you know, part of that is giving that to vendors like Coalfire, where we're saying, hey, this is how you know things are going well. And we're doing that, you know, both with our own offerings, but we also work with partners. We work with sort of the best of breed of the industry. When we see something helpful, we want to partner. And I don't mean integration. Like, people in business, they confuse partnership
more
and
data
integration.
and intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, true partners that work together.
To
And, you know, to the degree we can do that with our own threat intelligence, with our partners' insights, and start to give, like, measurable success criteria to these, you know, owners of these missions that are entrusting us with the activity.
I like it. What does good look like? How do we get there? The thing I'm thinking about now is, I mean, very technical, the work that you're doing. And you're working, I presume, with very technical people in IT and in security and operations and around that. Then there's the CISO that has to communicate the results of this stuff. So you said you can hack for free, or you're hacking for free. You
Pay to write the report.
Pay to write the report. To me, that report has to be actionable for the tech team, has to be actionable for the security leader, has to be actionable for the executive leadership team and the board to know we're on the right path. People are asking, they're also asking, what is good, and are we good? And if not, how do we get to good? And it's a multi-layered response there, right? So how do you help the executive team kind of get that answer?
A lot of times it's providing threat context. You know, this threat actor group is using this TTP, you know,
right,
providing that level of detail. But it's also storytelling and enabling the storyteller. You know, the ancient people would gather around a campfire and tell stories, and those stories would be passed down. And maybe they change a little bit. Well, it's kind of human nature. We want to make sure that our CISO is enabled to tell the story so that it has high fidelity and doesn't change. We want them to be able to speak just as if they're the one that found the flaw. Not in some sort of misleading context where they take credit for it, but in the context of they need to speak authoritatively. And that means that we've got to communicate so well with the team that they're comfortable moving forward with it. And some of that is education, but a lot of it is just, you know, making sure that the human factor is there. That we're not all ones and zeros,
right,
and that we're really putting people in place for success rather than just putting a process in place.
And maybe to that point, as we begin to wrap, then I'll ask you one more question about stuff you're talking about and seeing here. Just the approach organizations take when they think about doing a pen test or a red, blue, purple teaming exercise. You mentioned the human element, but I mean, back in the day was, we're going to give you access to this. Don't look at this.
Mm-hmm.
Give us the results in a PDF. That's what you provide, and then we'll go figure it out. How important is the bigger picture? Now, are the organizations actually approaching it that way, or are they still approaching it from we're going to send you off, and you come back, and we'll figure out what's next.
Most organizations today understand the value in not obscuring their findings, but they want to find as much as possible.
Right.
And part of that is setting the expectation up front. Any Fortune 2000 firm is generally going to understand that a finding is good because there's a couple ways you can find a finding. One is a pen test report or a red team, or you find a gap in detection from your red team. Great. Some people look at that as a negative. I say that given the alternative of finding it through a forensics,
your free bug bounty.
Or the worst scenario is that you call somebody's 24/7 incident response hotline and they find a vulnerability, or law enforcement contacts you. There are many ways to find a vulnerability, and finding one proactively is unbelievable. It should be a parade. And if you can get into that mindset, you're going to be more successful in security. If I can give one piece of advice to anyone, it's celebrate the painless finding of fault.
Yes.
Because if it's painless, that's a success.
That is success.
And so if you get in that mindset, then you start to win at security.
Right.
And so I find that most organizations get in that mindset pretty quickly, or they're already there today. Okay. But what I would say is that, some folks that may not be as well versed in security may need a little bit of hand-holding to get there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We need to
recognize it and actually embrace that reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that's that human element. It's really easy to take a flaw out of context and say, oh, this is bad. But if you start looking at, hey, this is a flaw, this threat actor group is using, you can get to the point where you're saying, because this threat actor group isn't the first to exploit it, we've won.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect. How are we doing on time here? We have a few minutes. I want to ask you, I'm going to go back a little bit. I have a reason for this. Your handle.
Mm-hmm. Angus, yes.
Angus. Tell us that story. This is an interesting part, but not the main thing. Tell us a story about Angus.
Here's the thing. If you look at somebody's handle, it's essentially a look back into their, well, at least for the old school folks, it was, a look into the 13-year-old self, and so many years ago now.
Not a couple years back.
Yeah, a couple years back. I'm wiser now. And it turns out that at the time when I chose my handle, I was a huge AC/DC fan. I still listen to AC/DC. I'm not a total disappointment to my childhood self, but I was really into AC/DC. I thought it was, my generation's Beatles. I know that it was good. It was good. And I mean, hey, Angus Young is still doing backspins on the guitar.
He's got the energy going.
I thought Angus Young, the lead guitarist of AC/DC, was the coolest thing. I play guitar. And it goes back to that musical background. And 3-chord songs are pretty easy to play. So it turns out that, that's sort of a view into my background. Grifter tells the story that, he was, saw the word in the dictionary and he's like, that's me. So that's how he got his handle. Yeah. But you look back at that sort of childhood naming convention, and when we get interns and they don't have handles, we often encourage them to take one out. I think it's a real rite of passage that I wish was still more prevalent in the security community.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned intern, because that's exactly where I was going to go with this. The building a team and keeping the skills, keeping the energy, keeping the love and the passion for it, keeping the rocking going.
Yeah.
We often hear there's a skills gap, and so how does Coalfire approach that? Because that's really your thing. Obviously, you have tools and services, technology to help. How do you keep the team fresh?
So it's a blend. A lot of it is going out, and obviously, I have a big Rolodex of people I know through the industry, through my work at the Black Hat Conference, to just my industry connections, people I've worked with previously. So I'm lucky enough to attract a lot of top tier talent to the team. So I have kind of an unfair advantage.
Right. That's
Okay,
good.
that's I don't shun it. But I love I'm lucky enough to have people that want to work with me. So that's great. But we also, even dating back to my previous stints, have always placed a real emphasis on talent development, bringing out, I think about CPTC, which for those that don't know, it's a collegiate program where they have basically penetration testing competitions. It's great. I encourage everyone to look it up. If they have a donate function, because I think it's not non-for-profit, I would highly suggest donate. I'm a big believer in giving back to that, looking at how we develop talent, but also taking some of that raw talent and starting to develop career progression. Thinking back to my own start, getting that resource and saying, hey, you're excited by it. You're enough so that you're participating in these competitions. Why don't you come and let's start to develop that? And that, honestly, that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
I love running into former interns that maybe are applying back to come with work for me, or even just walking around the show and having somebody come up to me and say, hey, I haven't seen you, I'm over here now, and learning that life story. That's cool. And so I invite others to do what they can to help develop some of this collegiate talent, because that's a really tough thing to teach in school. You can do the penetration testing competitions and whatnot, but really teaching in a classroom environment doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and many of us, I wasn't in the hacker path, I was in the engineering path, but many of us were given a chance. We weren't handed anything. We worked hard, but we were given a chance. And I think if we keep that same and give back and give others a chance, I think we're in good shape.
I believe it. It's really easy to take the gifts you've been given over life and say, wow, I'm lucky, and just move on.
Yep.
The hard part is saying, I need to return this favor. And but it's so rewarding that it's an amazing thing.
It is. Charles, pleasure chatting with you. Anything we didn't talk about yet?
Not that I can think of, but
All right.
other than enjoy the show, and
Right.
I look forward to Black Hat this year in the summer.
Black Hat's
So
going to be good.
hope to see you out there.
You certainly will. Certainly will. And I'm looking forward to seeing Grifter as well. And great work with the Coalfire team.
Hey.
And keep up the good work. And hopefully we'll have a chance to chat at Black Hat.
Absolutely, look forward to it.
And when off camera, we're going to keep talking music. Talk Gibson Les Paul stories. Everybody, thanks for joining us here. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Connect with Charles. Connect with the Coalfire team. Are you doing your pen testing pragmatically or tactically? Maybe want to think about that a bit more. Thanks, everybody. Stay tuned at itspmagazine.com/RSAC25. See you soon.